What you are seeing is a chart of the ideology of the professors at 55 of the top universities in the United States. That blue mountain is where the majority of professors at these schools sit ideologically. The dotted lines are where Congress is. Look at where the mountain sits. It lies to the left of the majority of Democrats in Congress. People like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and AOC would fit right in with the majority of the faculty. A Democrat like John Fetterman, a man who votes with Democrats over 95% of the time, would arguably be too conservative for university education. Now look at the blue on the right side of the chart. There's almost nothing. Not a smaller hill, nearly nothing. Just a few blips on the radar. This is what our universities have become. They're not a breeding ground for well-rounded intellectuals, but a factory. A factory that produces like-minded leftists who go out into the world and hire their own. A factory that has created a guild that only hires its own reflection. And I want to show you exactly how that guild was built, because it started with a law that almost nobody remembers. We'll get to that law in a sec, but first we need to talk about why this matters. You may say, who cares what the professors believe? Their job is to share information. And to an extent, you'd be right. In fields like medicine and engineering, the ideology of the professor doesn't matter much. The material is rigid. 2 plus 2 equals 3 plus 1. But what about law, media, education, the humanities? Those fields aren't black and white. And those are the fields that produce the gatekeepers, the people who decide who gets to be a lawyer. They decide who gets to be a teacher, a reporter, who runs HR, who sits in the university administration. Those jobs don't hand you a math test and hire you on the score. They ask for something softer, something closer to a judgment call. I'll give you an example from my own field. The bar exam is changing from the one that I took just 2 years ago. It used to test whether you knew the law. It's now moving toward how you interact with your clients. It's less about what you know and more about what you would say when a client is sitting across from you. Notice that shift. The test is moving away from what you know and toward what you think. And when the people teaching you how to think all think the same way, that shift has a direction. That's the engine. Professors lean left. They produce students who think like they do. Those students then go on to become the ones who decide who gets credentialed and who doesn't. Lawyers taught by leftists credential the next lawyers, also taught by leftists. It's the same in the other fields. Media taught by leftists hire the next media, also taught by leftists. And they all leave school believing the same thing. To be a good lawyer or a good journalist, you have to think like they do. So that's the problem. But how did we get here? How did the universities get so dominated by one side? It starts with something that we all already know. Tuition has skyrocketed over the last 25 years, but so has the number of faculty. You would think that more faculty means more diversity of thought, but the numbers show the opposite. So what happened? I won't pretend to know every reason, but here's a big one that you maybe haven't thought about. In 1976, Congress started making federal student loans nearly impossible to discharge in bankruptcy. By 1998, they locked it down almost completely. Go bankrupt, lose everything, and you still owe the federal government for school. Then, in 2005, Congress extended that same protection to private loans. Borrow from a bank to go to college, and no matter what happens to you, that bank gets paid. That one change rewired the incentives. Start with the lenders. Before, a private lender only gave money to students who showed real promise. The student had to have good grades, a plan, and a real chance to pay back the loan. After 2005, that caution was pointless. The loan gets repaid no matter what. So why not lend to everyone? Now follow it to the universities. Before, a school was under pressure to offer degrees that actually led to a job, because a degree that couldn't pay for itself couldn't get a loan. After 2005, that pressure vanished. If a school can sell a kid on a gender studies degree, there's now a private lender happy to fund it. It doesn't matter whether that kid ever finds work, the lender will get paid either way. So the schools expanded. They added gender studies, black studies, women's studies, left-wing coded majors that only left-wing students take and only left-wing professors teach. They built entire departments that never existed before. Centers for race and inclusivity, centers for LGBT acceptance, more faculty, more administrators, departments that don't bring in a dollar. And that's where the loop closes. More faculty forces higher tuition. Higher tuition funds more majors that can't produce a graduate capable of paying back a $200,000 loan. So where does that graduate go? They can't service the debt with the degree they earned. So they take the only job the degree qualifies them for, university administration. And once they're inside, they hire more people who think like they do. People who will climb, people who will build more departments for more left-wing ideas. And the wheel turns again. So now, how do we fix it? One fix, let people discharge student loans in bankruptcy again. That sets off a chain reaction. First, banks stop bankrolling degrees with no earning power because now the risk is back on them. Enrollment in those programs dries up, the universities lose the revenue that feeds the ideological departments, and then the schools are forced to scale back to the majors that actually hold value: business, science, math, law. Watch what that does to the loop. Right now, the system funds majors that produce students whose only option is to go work in the administration. Break the funding and that pipeline closes. Fewer students get funneled into dead-end degrees. The ones who do go to college get funneled toward degrees that lead to real work. They don't end up in the administration by default. They end up with a real value-creating job. And once people stop flooding into the administration, and the school stops hiring faculty whose only purpose is to advance an ideology, maybe the universities get back to what they were for: teaching students how to think, not what to think. Real philosophy. The tools to reason about the world instead of implicit instructions to mirror the professor. Now, let me be honest with you. That's a years-long process. The first step, letting people discharge those loans, could happen with the change in the law. But everything after it takes years. And even then, the administration is going to lean left for a long time. So that doesn't help you, the parent sending their kid off to college. That doesn't help you, the student about to head off to college. So let's talk about what you can actually do. Here's the hard truth. For most jobs, you cannot opt out of college. The degree is still the gate. It stands between yourself or your kid being an accountant or a lawyer or whatever he wants to be. And personally, I think an apprenticeship actually teaches better than a classroom. And I say that as someone who went to law school and practiced. But that's a conversation for another day. For now, the gate is the gate. So as a parent, you have to step in and do the university's job yourself. What you need to understand is that higher education was never about the job at the end. A higher education exists to help a student identify truth, articulate it, and defend it. A good school makes truth the thing that everything else is built around. The job is just a downstream effect of building a well-formed mind. And when you're sending your kid into a system that cares more about advancing an ideology than about the truth becomes your job. It is now your job to cultivate an environment at home where your kid learns to identify truth, articulate, and defend it. That's the only way to prepare your child to walk into the hive and come out the other side with his mind intact. Now, what does that actually look like? It looks like reading with your kids. Start young. Read real books, biographies of great men. Read Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics with them, and I mean with them. Sit down and talk about it. Watch historical documentaries. Learn the truth of our nation, the truth of nations past. Don't just tell your kid to be a conservative. Teach him what it means. Teach him what you believe, why you believe it, what you reject, and why you reject it. Having Fox News on in the background is not enough to prepare a kid to defend themselves in college these days. And if you're the student about to walk into all of this, be aware. Know that the ideology is going to show up when you least expect it, dropped into the middle of a class that has nothing to do with politics. When it does, push back. And push back by doing real work. Let me tell you what I mean by that. In 2021, I was getting my accounting degree online through Arizona State while working at my father's asphalt plant. I had a class, I think it was social ethics, something like that. The assignment was simple. Pick any excerpt from the textbook, any one I wanted, and react to it. So I flipped through the pages and found something that was slanted hard to the left. And I wrote about the author's obvious bias. I did it twice because there were two of these assignments. The first excerpt that I debunked was saying that the Republican and Democrats switched platforms in the mid-1900s. That's the Southern strategy lie, which is meant to help Democrats cope with the fact that they were the party of slavery. The second assignment I did was a short few paragraphs that detailed the history of the pro choice versus pro life movement. The author made it look like the pro lifers are an extremely fringe minority of the country, which is simply not true. So, in my reaction, I laid out why the textbook was wrong. I brought the real numbers, the statistics, the sources, the history. I showed exactly how the authors had shaded it. And here's what happened. My professor wrote back and told me that she had never noticed the bias before. She said that she would consider changing the textbook going forward. It was one student, two assignments, and a willingness to do the reading and bring the receipts. That's all it took to move her. That is the whole point. That is the work. So here's where we are right now. Right now we have a guild formed by the universities that produces and hires its own reflection. We're not going to tear down that guild from outside anytime soon. Not next year, maybe not in a decade. The law can change the incentives, and it should. But that's only the start of the process. You don't beat the system by burning it down. Not when you have no system to replace it. You beat it by raising a kid who can't be credentialed into the system without noticing. You raise a kid, or you become that student, who can sit in that classroom, recognize the slants, and keep your own mind. Be the kid who knows how to think before anyone gets the chance to tell you what to think. Because in the end, I always go back to my favorite quote from the Louis L'Amour book. The more a man knows, the more interesting life becomes. Learn a lot from the people who truly made a difference in the world. Don't let your mind be shaped by those who make their living standing behind a podium, but let it be shaped by the great men and women who built this country. That will be the thing that makes your mind impossible to capture. Subscribe and like the video for more from me. I'm trying to build a brand based on honest, reasonable takes and not the performative outrage you get from so many online these days. If that resonates with you, subscribe and head to my Substack to get new releases emailed directly to you. With that, I'll see you next time. Thank you.